The JMF Advisors Show is a podcast for business owners, C-suite executives, and entrepreneurs who are looking to build, grow, or even exit a business.
We bring in some of our best financial advisors to interview experts on business best practices, hot topics, and sprinkle in some tax and accounting help.
If you're a business owner, startup founder, CFO, or just starting your side hustle, this podcast is for you.
Hello, and welcome to the JMF Advisors Show. I'm Rachel Taylor. I'm a tax shareholder at JamisonMoneyFarmer, and I am joined today by Blake Madison, who is a shareholder and attorney at Rosen Harwood. And we have a great topic to discuss today, hopefully very timely, very informative, and this is the Corporate Transparency Act. So welcome, Blake. Thanks for joining us today.
Well, thanks for having me.
So we'll just jump in to this topic, very timely. Let's talk first about where did this come from? We call it the Corporate Transparency Act, CTA. Where did it come from? Why do we have this now?
Yeah, most everybody is hearing about CTA for the first time, but the act was actually passed by Congress back in 2021, and it's only this year become effective. And so it's just now beginning to affect businesses throughout the country.
So what's the purpose of this? Is this something that has been coming for a while, in the works for a while?
You know, as is often the case with many laws, the bad acts of a few people result in a lot of us having to do a lot of extra work. And that's kind of what's happened here. Is this was Congress's attempt to prevent money laundering, financing of terrorist organizations, things like that. And so as a result of that, they're requiring companies of different types to report their ownership information.
And this is common in other countries too, right? Do you know? Have you heard that?
There are some others that do this, yes.
So one thing that's come up around our office, maybe around your office too, is how do our clients, how do businesses, how are people finding out about this? Is it from people like us, their accountants, their attorneys, maybe their banker, something like that? Do you know?
Yeah, unfortunately, I think most people are not finding out about this. I find from talking with our clients that, they have not heard about this. They don't know this is an existing issue, that they need to do something. And so it is, I think, incumbent on accountants and attorneys to make sure that our clients are advised about it. I'm sure some industry groups are getting the word out as well, but by and large, ignorance seems to be the situation.
I think you're right. I had a handful of questions in the first few months of the year about it. I might send somebody a link to a website, but I didn't feel like I got as many questions from my clients as maybe I should have.
Yeah, same here.
Which tells me I don't think it's because they had it all figured out. I think it's because they just didn't know about it.
Yeah, and I think a lot of even CPAs and attorneys were kind of holding back because there was so much we didn't know about it. And still, that's true to a certain extent, but there was so much we didn't know that we were kind of waiting to see what additional guidance we'd get before we started notifying everybody.
Right, because you don't want to put something out there and then not be able to answer questions.
Exactly.
That's no fun.
That's right.
So the FinCEN, this is processed through the Financial Crimes Reporting Unit, FinCEN. And their website estimates that 32.6 million entities are going to have to comply with this in 2024, with another 5 million added each year.
Yeah.
So we're talking about a ton, even in our small little world here. We're talking about a lot of...
Most of our clients probably have to file. So
yes, I think you're right. So like most things in our world, a lot of acronyms here. We call it the CTA. We got FinCEN. I couldn't even tell you for sure what that stands for. We got BOI, which is probably where we need to go next. Yeah. So that's beneficial ownership information, which is really what they're collecting.
That's right. CTA is the name of the act itself, but BOI reporting is really what we're concerned about here.
So what exactly is that? What are they looking for?
For BOI reporting, that we have to report the beneficial owners, and that's a legal term in the law, and that is either persons that own or control at least 25% of the entity, or, and this is where it gets tricky, individuals that either directly or indirectly have what they call substantial control of the company, and that can be, any of your officers, your president, CEO, COO, sometimes even general counsel, regardless of their ownership interest in the entity. Oh. So it pulls in more folks than a lot of people understand. It's not just your owners of the company.
Right, because that would be pretty simple.
Yeah.
We got two 50-50 owners.
Yeah,
Here you
exactly.
go.
Exactly.
But if you're talking about substantial control, and that does sound like that will be where things get tricky. So we discussed that most of our clients, our client base, probably most people listening to this, probably will fall under the filing requirement.
Right.
So pass-through entities, right? That's a big one. Are C corporations responsible for this?
All legal entities that are formed with the Secretary of State or an Indian tribe, with the limited set of exemptions that we have out there, have to report.
Okay.
So yes, corporations, limited partnerships, LLCs, all those.
All those. And there are some exemptions.
Correct.
Right? Some limited exemptions.
It's nonprofit entities that are tax exempt for federal income tax purposes under 501c do not have to report. Large companies, and this is also an area where it gets kind of tricky, that's defining large companies.
Right.
There's some specific requirements there. Those do not have to report. There are also several regulated industries, banking, insurance, those type companies do not have to report because they're already reporting through their regulated entities.
Oh, okay.
And somehow our accounting friends got public accounting firms exempted as well. So they don't have to
Handy.
report either. So.
That worked out pretty well.
Yeah, absolutely. But as far as the large company reporting exemption, some of the requirements there, they have to have a physical office in the U.S. They have to have at least 21 employees, full-time employees, throughout the year. They have to have at least $5 million in gross receipts or sales reported on their income tax returns. And there's some subtleties in there as well with the timing. So be very careful if you're going to claim that exemption.
Yeah, when I was reading about that, I thought, well, what if you had a little over $5 million one year, a little less than $5 million one year? Would that pull you back?
It does pull you back,
Okay.
and you have only 30 days to then report.
Oh, okay.
So a very short time.
So maybe if you're on the bubble, maybe you should report.
Yeah, it's very tricky there because, and you'll particularly see this with employees. You have to have that 21 employees full-time throughout the year. So if you drop below at any point, you need to file. So yeah, I think that if you're close on either one of those, you need to think about it because it gets very tricky.
Because you don't want to get caught by that we'll talk about the 30-day period in a minute, but you don't want to get caught by thinking you're exempt and
That's right.
suddenly not being exempt.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Okay, well that's we can move on to that next topic of the timing. When do you do this? What are important dates, deadlines, all that?
Well, the important thing for existing entities that were created before 2024 is that you have throughout this year until January 1, 2025 to file your initial report. For new entities formed in 2024, they have 90 days from formation to file. And starting next year in 2025, new entities have 30 days to report. So it's pretty much something that we would recommend being done along with your formation pretty quickly.
Sure. So probably I haven't read any numbers lately, but at one point I read a few 100,000 people had reported so far this year, which sounds like a lot until you compare it to the probably total number that should be reporting.
Oh, yeah.
So it makes me wonder, I don't know what it is like today, if they're even making that information public.
I would still imagine it's very low.
Very
I
low.
know, even for our clientele, we have filed some of these, but I would say for the number of clients that we have, it's a very small number, those that we've actually filed for at this point.
Yes, I would imagine we'd probably be in that same boat. So if you're already formed prior to January 1 of 24, you just need to do it sometime this year.
That's correct.
But if you were formed after starting January 1 or later, you need to make sure yours has been
quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then if you have a change.
Yeah, that's the thing that I worry about most with our clients is that if you have any change in the information that you report, you only have 30 days to report that change. And all this is done online on the FinCEN website, so it's not difficult, but remembering to make that change if one of your owners changes their address, if your company changes its address, if you have a new officer come in that falls into that substantial control, any of those changes, you've got to report that within 30 days. So
Right.
I think it's going to be very difficult for all of our clients to stay on top of that and remember to do that.
I agree. If you have an owner that dies, you'd have to report
Absolutely.
any kind of change.
Any change in the information that you report.
So your office has helped some people, some
Yes.
companies. So when you're helping them get started, what do you tell them to gather? What kind of information do they need to
There's
get?
very specific information that's required in the reports. You got really two sets of information. You need your information on your beneficial owners, so you need their full legal name. You need to get their date of birth. You need to get identifying documentation, either a driver's license or a passport. You have to submit both the identification document number, but also a copy of it. So it has to be current, and you have to send that in. And then you also have to send in information on the company itself, the full legal name of the company, any doing business as names, the physical address for the company, the EIN or the TIN if that's applicable. So you have all that. And then for newer entities that are created in 2024 and later, you also have to report information on what's called the company applicant. So that is the person that assists with and directs the filing of the documents with the Secretary of State. So in our case at our firm, if I form an entity for a client and my paralegal then files that with the Secretary of State, we have to report information on both her as the direct filer and me as the one who's directing that to be done.
Oh, really?
And so that information, that's not required for entities that existed before this year, but starting with 2024, you have to report that information as well.
Wow. Okay. That's pretty detailed.
Luckily, you don't have to report changes in that down the road. So if my address changes down the road, I don't have to report that.
That's one bit of good news.
Exactly.
Okay. So, I mean, that all sounds kind of simple, but that could also be time consuming to gather all that.
It is, and just getting clients to get in the documentation, particularly the copies of the driver's license, you'd think that would be easy, but
Right.
I'm finding that folks just have a hard time remembering to send that to us and get it to us in a format that we can submit. That's the other thing.
Oh, right.
So, if it's a clean PDF or something that we can submit, then we can do that. But we've had some issues with that already, so.
I could see that. We have that same. We have to have driver's license information for tax returns, and sometimes it is hard to get it. Sometimes a picture taken with your phone isn't that great.
Yes, exactly.
You need maybe a photocopy or something.
That's correct.
So I could definitely see that. So we've discussed how maybe a lot of businesses aren't really aware of this yet. And if they are, they probably don't really know what to do. Maybe they've heard about it. Maybe a trade organization they belong to has published something. And I think that's how some of my clients have found out about it, through the construction industry, whatever, may
and
apply.
I expect you'll see even more of that as the year goes along.
Yes, as people kind of catching on. So where do you direct people if they have questions, if they need some kind of resources to the website?
Well, we certainly recommend that they give us a call. They can certainly talk with their CPA for some guidance, although I understand most CPA firms are not choosing to file these.
That's
because
correct.
There's a lot of legal jargon and interpretation that's required in these for some entities.
Right.
FinCEN has a fairly good website. They have some FAQs there that are helpful. They've also published a small business guide that kind of helps walk through the process and the information that's needed, and it's pretty useful as well. So that's out there and available as well.
So you might start there, and then you probably need to call somebody for some assistance.
Particularly if there's anything complicated about your ownership. If you have layers of ownership that are entities, then it gets very complicated very quickly. If you're not sure about your individuals that have substantial control that are not owners, then that's probably when you need to talk to an attorney and get more guidance and get into the regulations so we can determine who needs to be reported.
Yeah, that sounds like the time you need to bring in an expert. If you've got a pretty simple family partnership or something, maybe not too complicated,
Correct.
But it sounds like this could get complicated quickly if you're not.
It can.
And if you've cleared the hurdle of, okay, I've heard about this, okay, maybe I've determined that I do need to file, then and I've been to that website. It does have some pretty good information on there. It's at least a good place to start.
Exactly.
But it may not answer everything.
And there's not a lot of information out there outside of that because this is so new. The regulations, are fairly new as well. You'll find summaries on a lot of different websites, but they basically have the same information on that. So it's pretty straightforward at this point. We don't obviously have any cases or anything that interprets a lot of this. So basically we're going by what is in the regulations and what FinCEN has made available on their website.
So what if you don't file? What if you don't know about it, you don't file, you don't do it, you don't update, whatever?
Yeah. Well, there are, unfortunately, or fortunately for the government, I guess, there are penalties, and they're pretty substantial, or can be, if you don't comply. You have both civil and criminal penalties that could apply. On the civil side of things, it's up to $500 a day for
Whoa.
each violation, up to $10,000. On the criminal side, if you willfully don't file, you can be imprisoned for up to 2 years. And if they tie that in with some type of anti-money laundering, it can be up to 10 years in prison. So they're not playing around. They want compliance with this, and it can be very costly, at least from your pocketbook, if not potentially prison.
Wow. Yeah. You wouldn't expect it to get that far.
And I think that's the extreme. I think
Yeah.
you'd most likely see the civil penalties. But, if you're willingly not doing it and you're supposed to, criminal prosecution is possible.
I don't know if you have an answer to this or not, but are people concerned about privacy? Like, is that a concern out there? Like, I don't want to give all my information.
Yeah, there's a big concern about privacy, and the government folks that are running this recognize that, and they've spoken to that, and there's supposedly protections in place with that system. But as most of us all know at this point, there's no fail-proof system out there. So,
Sure.
but they do acknowledge that, and they do address that on their website, and they're supposedly limiting access to this information. There are certain government entities that do have access to this as part of this attempt to defeat money laundering and terrorist financing, but they're supposedly limited. So,
Well, that's good. Hopefully it'll be used by the people who need to use it. and
I'm a little
that's it.
skeptical just because
Right.
we all every day see different websites breached and information released, including government websites.
Oh, for sure.
So, but it is something they're aware of. So,
Well, that's the first start, right?
Exactly.
Awareness of a problem
Yeah.
or potential problem, I guess. So this is, you said this act started in 2021, but it just didn't take effect until this year.
Correct.
So what's the future look like? You mentioned a little bit about shortening the time period for reporting, but what other than that do we know about?
Yeah, there's a lot of unknown at this point.
Sure.
One of the biggest things that's happened so far this year is there was a federal case that was decided in the Northern District of Alabama, ironically, that ruled that the law is unconstitutional as applied to the particular plaintiffs in that case. That is on appeal, has already been filed by the government. So, that will be, who knows, years before we know if that is applied more broadly. But at this point, as a result of that case, if our audience is a member of the National Small Business Association, they're exempted from filing at this point because of that case decision, but only members of that association and the particular plaintiffs in that case.
Oh.
So, there's the possibility that it could go away completely. But I don't think that's going to happen this year, so we all need to be in compliance between now and then. Regulations can change, but at this point, we don't have any guidance that would indicate that we're going to have major changes in the short term.
Okay. So we don't need to rely on that case to think that we're exempt necessarily.
Yeah, absolutely not. I don't think it would be wise because the appeal process will go on for quite some time, I expect.
So we're recording this in early June, so we're almost halfway through this year. Yeah. So I'm guessing another point of information for people is don't wait till the end of the year to do this.
That is a point I definitely wanted to make this today because, I don't want folks to wait till the end of the year, which is, a very busy time for business attorneys anyway.
Sure.
With transactions and such. Plus, unlike a tax return, we can't file extensions at this point. We don't have ability to request extensions of time. So we have a pretty hard deadline out there. And if everybody waits to the last minute, then it's going to be very difficult, particularly in these more challenging ones, to determine who needs to file, what information. So the sooner the better.
For sure. You're right. End of the year's busy enough.
Plus, some of us would like to go on holiday. So.
Right, yeah. Well, don't make it more complicated. Is there anything we haven't covered in this topic that you wanted to mention?
I think just mainly, getting yourself informed about this. making sure you understand what needs to be filed, getting that done either yourself or through your business attorney, and coming up with a system of how you're going to remember to report changes in a timely way, because we have such a short time period to report changes. I think that's going to be a big challenge. And so each business needs to come up with some system that keeps up with the information that's reported and how we deal with that when that information changes.
That's a really good point, because that would be so easy to slip your mind.
Yeah, it's just going to be out of mind for most folks. So you need to try to, and I don't have an answer for that yet as to how you do that. I mean, you would hope that your attorney, if you're making changes that the attorney knows about, would remind you to do that, even though that will not be their obligation. I know for our firm, we're making it very clear to our clients, if you have a change in information, if you want us to report that, you need to let us know. Otherwise, it's your obligation. So everybody just needs to come up with whatever is going to work for them to remind them on a regular basis to check this and to report it if there's a change.
That's probably a good reminder for our office too. We're not always involved when ownership changes or something like that happens,
Right.
But if we are, that'd be a good time for us to just try to plug that too. Like, hey, don't forget.
Yeah, it would certainly be a value to your clients to remind them to do that or to contact their attorney
Right.
when those changes are there. Unfortunately for you and I, most of the time we find out about these changes much later than 30 days.
True.
But even then, the sooner you report it, the better.
So even if you are late, better just go ahead and do it.
Yes, I mean you may have some penalties to pay, but we don't want to get to the point where we have the criminal issue coming into play. So sooner the better.
And maybe, fingers crossed, maybe they'll be lenient in the beginning.
I would
Who knows?
expect that they will, and I really would hope that they would change that 30-day period, give you a little longer at some point, but that's what we have right now. They have played with the deadlines already a little bit by lengthening the entities formed in 24 to 90 days. So I'm hopeful that they'll look at changing the 30-day window for the change reporting. But at this point, that's what it is.
Right. So we got to operate under that.
That's right.
That set of rules for now.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we covered a lot. In a seemingly simple topic, nothing's ever simple though, right? I mean,
Well, this is one of those things that can be very simple or it can be very complex depending on the company and how it's made up, how its ownership is divided up, and who actually runs the day-to-day operations of the company. So it can be as simple or complicated as you want it to be, I guess.
as your company is, maybe.
Exactly.
So if you have questions, the website's a good place to start. Reach out to your attorney. Reach out to your accountant. We'll tell you to go reach out to your attorney. Just get some help, but don't wait.
Yeah, this is a teamwork kind of thing. We
For
can
sure.
get through this together, but we do need to all work together and get the information that's needed to make the determination of what needs to be filed.
That's right. Well, this has been really good information. Very timely. Thank you, Blake.
Absolutely.
For all the information. So thank you for listening or watching today, whichever method you were choosing. So if you have not already, please go to YouTube and subscribe, and that way you'll be notified for all future podcasts. We've got some rolling out that you don't want to miss. So thanks for joining us.
Give Rachel a thumbs up.
Yeah. Like us or whatever the thing is. We 5 stars, I don't know, whatever it is.
All those things.
We will take it.
That's right.
Thank you.
If you would like us to help your business or would like to suggest additional podcast topics, simply send an email to info@jmf.com.
And don't forget to subscribe to our podcast on YouTube and your favorite audio podcast apps.